love flock. U.S. service members are now mocking the Iran war and Israel's influence on the United States by writing messages on an airplane wing. Here's some of the messages. It says, BB's cucks, I love flock cameras, be a good goy and do what Israel tells you to. Some other ones include Operation Epstein Fury, Peace Deal number 64 incoming, all this for the Holy Land, and I love Israel, I am a good goyim. These messages were written by U.S. military members in the Persian Gulf, and that picture was shared online today. Additionally, a U.S. serviceman sent a message highlighting a complete lack of internal motivation among troops stuck in open-ended deployments. The core takeaway of this leak is the text given by the anonymous serviceman. The soldier explicitly said this operation has no morale behind it. The service member noted that being deployed indefinitely to undesirable locations for a cause they don't believe in makes the situation incredibly difficult for those on the ground. The political analyst who broke this story concluded when a war completely lacks morale, the only way to truly win is to end it. U.S. service members are now...
Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all honor, all glory, and all praise to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem,
mocking the...
Rachah Quadash, double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone, who rule well and teach well, whose labors we have entered into. Shalom to the elect, beginning with the chosen 144,000, mentioned in Revelation, the 7th chapter. And to all you brothers tuning in, and you few sisters, may this lesson be edifying and uplifting. This is the brother Halal from the Great Millstone Chicago camp coming at you with another lesson in truth. And there's division between Esau and Amalek, and as you see, the title, U.S. service members mock Israel's influence on the U.S. by writing messages on the airplane wing. And you seen on, the wing of the airplane what those messages were. With the popular term that those Amalekites use was those are the people over there in the Holy Land. The term that they use, goyim, things like that. Let's just show a photo of the airplane wing. Little BB's cucks, like Elder Malcolm says, BB Milikowski, from Poland, whose name now is Benjamin Netanyahu, the current, prime minister of the Holy Land. It says, be a good goy and do what those people tell you. I love flock cameras and things of that nature. So they're openly mocking the fact that their leaders sold out to a country, not even half its size. The American people wonder why their country that has been lifted up by their leaders as the world's biggest superpower has sold out for a country so much smaller. And there's division amongst Esau and Edom regarding this whole war in Iran. Because, as we all know, in 2025, Iran actually launched the airstrikes on Iran that stirred up the tension between America and Iran. Israel were the first ones who launched an airstrike in June of 2025. And it resulted in a very short war that only lasted 12 days. And it's funny, now that America has gone to war with Iran, a popular financer, as you can see from the AI overview, it says, Israeli finance minister Bezalel Smotrich stated that Israel has no interest in directly joining the renewed U.S. military campaign against Iran, asserting that a localized conflict between Washington and Tehran best serves Israeli strategic interest. And this has pissed off the Edomites, the so-called white man in America. They're pissed off because Amalek, the chief tribe of the house of Esau, completely sold them out. And it's gotten them in a conflict at the conflict at the conflict. And according to prophecy, as we're going to show you, Amalek is going to get Esau into complete and total war. And we're seeing that play out right now in front of our very eyes. But going straight to the scriptures, the book of Mark, chapter 3, and verse 23. And it says, he called them unto him, this is Yahweh Shai speaking, and said unto them in parables, how can Satan cast out Satan? And if a kingdom be divided against itself, that kingdom cannot stand. And if a house be divided against itself, that house cannot stand. And if Satan rise up against himself and be divided, he cannot stand, but hath an end. So this is a parable of Yahweh Shai, the only begotten Son of the Heavenly Father. And we're seeing that in the house of Esau, which Esau, Edom is indeed the devil that the Bible speaks of, with the two main scriptures proving that being, of course, Isaiah, the 14th chapter, and 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, the 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, Salakia, verses 3 on down to around 8. So these people, this is the devil that the Bible speaks of. That's why they pollute everything. They poison the food, biological warfare. They start wars with these nations in an attempt to drain the land of its vital resources. But in the house of Satan, in the house of Esau, Edom, there's a division amongst them. There's a division amongst the ranks. Because Amalek, they sold the rest of these Edomites out. Or rather, they didn't give them a piece of the pie. In beginning with the elite, Amalekite-ish international banking families, they have used America as their cash crop. They set up the banking system, to extrapolate wealth from the people, to price them out of everything. All the money that the central banks print into the markets, they're the ones that get their hands on it first. Or matter of fact, no, Salaki, they're the ones that print the money. They're the ones that print this fiat currency that's not backed by anything, that's created infinite debt spirals, that has completely priced out the working class. So these Edomites, they have a strong hatred. These lower class, working class Edomites have a strong hatred for Amalek. And amongst these soldiers, a lot of them are afraid, to go to war. But on the other hand, a lot of them are angry because they know that the reason they're going to war, is complete madness. They know that they're going to war for no good reason. Because as multiple news articles have stated, and even the Trump administration themselves, Iran had no plan or intent on striking, on bombing America. America's never even been bombed. You got to think, this is a country that's been, established for 250 years. They've been at war for over 230 of those years, so over 80%. And out of all those years they've been at war, America's never gotten hit by missiles, not once. As a matter of fact, the American government has a history of false flag attacks on their own people, on the general populace that dwells in the land, that works these jobs, that the elites profit from, that they invest in, these different companies and such. So, the mighty men of Babylon, this is Jeremiah chapter 51 and 30, and it says, the mighty men of Babylon have forborne to fight. They have remained in their holds. Their might had failed. They became as women. They have burned her dwelling places. Her bars are broken. So you have a lot of, the mighty men, which of course the mighty men are who? The warriors, the ones that are sent to war. In the event of major crisis, to where soldiers have to place their boots on the ground. And the mighty men of Babylon, which the modern day Babylon, the daughter of Babylon is America, and it is being ruled by Esau. They no longer have the will or the strength to fight. They know about the wickedness that the elite who control the Western world, they know about the wickedness that they partake in, via things like the Epstein files, Pizzagate, the sacrificing of children and things of that nature. So they're looking at the fact that they're going to war with a country that had no intent on bombing them, and they're thinking in their heads, what the fuck are we doing this for? And these Amalekites, or rather, the elite, the well-to-do Amalekites, they're profiting from all of it, man. Let's go on Google real quick. Let's see a search. How much Let's see how much they receive from each state. It says how much money each U.S. state gives to Amalek, of course. Texas, 1.4 billion, California, 2.8 billion. Illinois, 713 million. New York, 1.4 billion, the state of New York. And you see all the other numbers that's being shown here. And this is the reason why these soldiers, these are Babylonian, these American soldiers don't have the will to fight. Because they know that the leaders of their country have sold out to a foreign entity that has